I think there's one more question in this title race for Mikel Arteta and Arsenal to answer. One more puzzle to solve. And that's to do with the midfield trio of Declan Rice, Martín Zubimendi and Martin Odegaard. But Harvey, we're 6 points clear. It's the biggest margin we've been top of the Premier League all season. I'm trying to stay calm. Last weekend's results may not be decisive, but they felt big, and it feels like things are going our way for the first time. And with us, in this good moment right now, it's the perfect time for me to get my thinking cap on and talk about, yes, how we can get even better. Today's analysis is going to start by explaining the reasoning behind the midfield setup of Rice and our two Martins that we've seen start together in 3 of Arsenal's last 5 games. What's worked or is developing really well, but also the dynamics I am still unsure about, because I don't think it's flawless yet, and there are some potential fixes I'm going to analyse later. Welcome back to the Harvey Gratian YouTube channel. I'm so glad you found us or are joining us once again. And let's start with why Zubimendi, Rice, Ødegaard feel like Arteta's first choice midfield 3 at the moment, and ultimately, what's working? I want to use some passages from our 3-2 win at Bournemouth. Now, bar Rice, Ødegaard incidentally, and also Madueke and Raya, our technical levels as a collective were miles off, and that didn't give us the chance to use the platform that our tactical advantages this midfield 3 had given us. Inside the first 20 minutes, actually, we quieted Bournemouth, the crowd and their press. Gabriel, of course, made his error on 10 minutes, but we regained our control. And then we let the chaos in. We know this midfield 3 is going to swirl. It's this kind of revolving circuitry of players, but the distribution in our touches was the best I think it's been across these 3 against Bournemouth, who typically press with a man down. At first, Ødegaard here is the free man we look to find, but as Tavernier gets stuck in between, Rice opens up, and Iraola's intention to squeeze onto Gabriel looks more unsuccessful at this point, and it's now Zubimendi who can sneak free, and I want you to watch Hincapie here, because his movement is both the solution and the problem that I think at times can develop in this midfield. With our left back being a roamer this season, Zubimendi spies his underlap and releases him away. Hincapie's cross is ahead of Gyokeres, but we'll leave the fullback discussion to the side for now, because in our very next wave of attack we form that base of 4 I've banged on about a lot, with our fullbacks in those half and half roles. Rice plugs Zubimendi's gap, Ødegaard and Timber switch, and Timber, our fullback, narrows pretty extremely so Noni can have a run 1v1. So in the first 5 minutes here, we see, I think positionally, the spacing between Ødegaard, Zubimendi, Rice is better, and that helps with that slickness and that tempo, and the wavelengths are clearly strengthening too. But I said the fullback movement was both the solution and the problem for us, and I want to explain why. More and more, we've found this shape of late, where our fullbacks are our biggest movers, but there's a heavy emphasis on them pinning or being kind of decoys. Now, 2 things. First of all, this isn't a bad thing. I just showed you the conditions this can create for our right winger to have easy box entries. And on the left, those kind of double movers I've been talking about a lot is what Trossard has used so well to access the middle of the pitch through his really incisive passing. But with Calafiori injured and Hincapie a different kind of left back, when Hincapie has been inside and not pushing our left winger infield, finding him in these kinds of situations has proved much more difficult, and the loss as well of Calafiori's ideas and his kind of wackiness is felt too, of course. Against Villa, for instance, we lacked these kinds of counter movements off Merino, and how often do I go on about the importance of those counter movements for us, and we found them much better against Brentford. So what's missing? I'm not going to attribute this to a Martin Odegaard return, who's had a really nice pace and purpose to all of his performances of late and has looked really good. And also because the Bournemouth win showed how this midfield of Ødegaard, Rice and Zubimendi can still possess these counter movements and at least a little bit more of that pocket presence. I think, and in the Everton game this was something that was clear, can go missing, those counter movements and that pocket presence. But against Bournemouth, we found more of this, and this is where we began to look a little bit more PSG-like. I'm not going to repeat myself on Martín Zubimendi's potential in the final third, but I think allowing him to be a little bit more ambitious whilst Ødegaard and or Rice sit is something we can continue to explore. But this has become a really repeatable dynamic for him actually, and hopefully it's going to return now. Ødegaard drops out the block and Rice fills in, and with Timber very deliberate in where he's positioned, we open up this high right pocket for Zubimendi to arrive into. After the Sunderland game, I dedicated a whole video to Arsenal's improved block breaking, and despite variation in personnel, you can see the similar sort of effect this passage of play creates. So, our number 6, joining play from a bit deeper, these runs from midfield, from deep, is something I want to see more of across the board, as a way of maintaining those arrivals, our movement, our runs, and also to make better use of Ødegaard in this team. We've seen Mourinho, who actually makes, ironically, that kind of midfield balance pick itself because he's clearly a kind of low-touch player in that 3. But we've seen him roam across from left centre mid and overload into these pockets whilst we pin above him. Remember against Spurs how for each goal it was a different player making that centre-forward type run with. Barring Mourinho for Trossard's opener, it was Eze each time who trailed just behind this kind of stretching force. So there's a need to find these counter movements, I think, aside from our fullbacks, especially when we don't have that calafiori wild card to play. But also, I think they're a kind of on show against Bournemouth, and in the examples I've just shown, a clear relationship between players and their roles. And against Bournemouth, like I said, I think we switched in and out of these better. For both of Rice's goals against Bournemouth, it's a very Eze-type situation in terms of trailing the players, pulling a backline deeper, and we've used Rice to great effect in these other kinds of roles, more pinny roles before, but we've done that a little bit too extremely because he certainly holds that threat in his off-ball movement, but this is where he can do the most damage, the maximum damage, and where we can get a lot more goals simply out of him. And giving Rice the decision of when to attack, when to arrive in the box, is one of the massive upsides of starting him deeper, using him deeper this season, using him more across the pitch, and maybe getting more of these kind of direct link-ups with our other midfielders. We spoke about Zubimendi, how he can arrive in those high right pockets. If that Brighton performance from Rice didn't teach you anything, it's that accentuating these rotations and switching of sides between this midfield 3 more and more, not all the time, but creating situations where Rice can add some of his qualities on the right hand side, I think is only going to help us and be more unpredictable. Of course, going back to the 2 Rice goals against Bournemouth, there are 2 massive moments of quality from Martin Odegaard, a brilliant run and cutback from Saka too. These kinds of game-breaking bits of quality that in a blink had us suddenly on top. And it's also, in these moments, it's so clear what our players are good at, if that makes sense. It's about removing, maybe against Aston Villa where this was the case, removing that kind of confusion of where sometimes you're trying to do the job or the role or doing the same job or role as someone else, and understanding where your partners can do the most damage. That's the next step for this midfield. These are the types of passes I want to see when we create a little bit of space on the edge of the box for Ødegaard, or if he's clipping the ball, keeping these scoops shorter range, because I'm sure I'm not the only one who thinks when he plays those longer range crosses from the half space, he gets the keeper far too interested. And to finish, I want to look towards the future as well, and I think the squad is in a fantastic position where we don't have to rely on this trio every single game. We're in a place where if Zubimendi needs a rest, Ødegaard and Rice can play a kind of in-possession pivot dynamic that replicates a lot of what Rice and Zubimendi do if we're just going for that fixed double pivot with Nwaneri or an Eze ahead of them. And we're also in a place where if we want to keep Ødegaard, Rice and Zubimendi together, as Arteta considers them a kind of first choice and they build in rhythm and understanding, then the hincapie or calafiori alongside Eze partnership on the left-hand side is at least one I want to see given another few run-outs, because it was certainly in Mikel's early season plans. Trossard in the interim has become pivotal with the partnerships and the stability he's given us off the left, but the upside feels too good to completely ignore in that Calafiori and Hincapie and Eze left-hand side partnership. That's maybe a fitting way to move on to speaking about Ethan Nwaneri for just a second, because of course minutes have been hard to come by, and I really do feel for him because I think his interpretation of Ødegaard's role this season, being a little more dribbly, making strides, I think turning out against pressure, these can definitely give us different ideas, but who knows, he might be on his way out on loan in January. But whichever way you look at it, this video is my look at our team who are well worth their lead at the top of the table. And it feels, like I said at the beginning, the perfect moment to ask these questions. What's left for us and Mikel to solve? What are we, and what can we do to solve these puzzles, and where do we go from here? I'm still figuring out, actually, where I definitively stand myself in this discussion, but I think after making this video, in terms of answering that question of can this midfield work, I'm far more strongly saying yes, it can. It needs more minutes for sure, and do I think it's perfect in every game? No, I don't. And I think a lot of it boils down to the players and Arteta understanding what these different game states require. Bournemouth away required some calm when the team couldn't pass a ball. And I think this busy, fast, festive period will require some more of that. But also, we want to remain unpredictable. If we get this right, and most importantly probably, we keep a lot of our players healthy, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I'm beginning to smile. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, hype, subscribe if you have enjoyed. That would mean the world. I will catch you very, very shortly. See you later.